So the ATF's bump stock rule was struck down by the Fifth Circuit, and now other ATF actions like the pistol brace rule are going to be impacted. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think the ATF needs to be abolished, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to mention that the Gundies voting is currently open. I am nominated once again in the category for top two-way voices. I won last year. A lot of you may recall. You can actually see the award back there. So I won last year. I would love to win back-to-back years. That would be really cool. If you would like to vote for me, you can use one of the links down in the details section or in the comment section. And also, if you vote every single day, the Gundies Awards is giving away a ton of prizes. So again, I would love to have your vote, but regardless, thank you guys for all of your support. So like I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we will be discussing the recent Fifth Circuit en banc panel's ruling in the Cargill case and what impact that will have on other ATF actions and other ATF overreach, like with the rule on frames and receivers, and also their rule on pistol braces. As you may recall, the Fifth Circuit en banc panel recently ruled in the Cargill v. ATF case, and that was in regards to the ATF's final rule on bump stocks, and ultimately there, the Fifth Circuit en banc panel found that that rule was indeed invalid. So let's take a deeper look into this case and some of the language that will have huge implications going forward. The Cargill case involved a direct challenge to the ATF's rule, which suddenly regulated and banned bump stocks under the assumption that those items were now all of a sudden machine guns. For many years, the ATF had stated that the NFA and GCA's definition of the term machine gun does not include devices like bump stocks. However, after the incident in Las Vegas, the ATF, after being ordered by then President Trump, decided to arbitrarily change the regulatory definition of machine gun so that bump stocks would be considered to be machine guns under that definition. This case, Cargill, was a direct challenge to that rule. One of the important aspects of that challenge was whether Chevron deference should be given to the ATF in relation to their final rule on bump stocks, or whether a different rule called the rule of lenity would direct courts to rule in a way that is most favorable to us, the people, not the ATF. If you're not aware of what Chevron deference refers to, Chevron deference is a term coined after a significant Supreme Court case referring to the doctrine of judicial deference given to administrative actions. Generally, for an agency to be given Chevron deference, the agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute must be rational or reasonable. In contrast to Chevron deference, there is a different rule, which is called the rule of lenity. The rule of lenity indicates that when dealing with criminal statutory interpretation, i.e. a statute that has criminal implications, a court is required to apply any unclear or ambiguous law or term in a way that is most favorable to us, the people, not the enforcement agency like the ATF. In fact, the interpretation of the definition machine gun does involve criminal penalties because the GCA has criminal penalties, like I mentioned, 10 years in prison, and therefore the argument in this case was that the rule of lenity would direct courts to interpret it in a way that is most favorable to us, not the ATF. Well, in a 13-3 decision, the en banc panel in the Fifth Circuit found indeed that the ATF overstepped its authority in regulating bump stocks as machine guns under that definition in the GCA. The Fifth Circuit stated, a plain reading of the statutory language paired with close consideration of the mechanics of a semi-automatic firearm reveals that a bump stock is excluded from the technical definition of machine gun set forth in the GCA and NFA. Now, that is actually something really important. One of the really interesting things that the Fifth Circuit did in that decision is they actually went through the mechanism of a firearm, of what a machine gun would actually be. They looked at it technically, the operation of the firearm, the operation of a bump stock, and found that technically and mechanically, these items could not be deemed to be machine guns. They also went in and looked at the definition of the GCA and found that since mechanically it didn't meet the definition of the GCA, in no way could bump stocks be determined to fall under that definition. They also stated that the ATF's rule violated the principle of tenderness of law towards the rights of individuals. And even if the term was considered ambiguous or vague on this very issue, the court concluded that the rule of lenity would direct the interpretation in our favor, not to the ATF's favor in considering these items to be machine guns. The court states that if Congress or the ATF wants the definition to include these items, they will need to change the statute, but the ATF does not have the power to unilaterally change the definition on their own. And it's that concept that will set the framework for the demise of the ATF and some of their other actions and rules. For example, the ATF created and has now put into effect their rule on frames and receivers. That rule went into effect in mid-August and regulates unfinished frames or receivers, or 80%ers, and it treats them to actually be firearms under the definition of the GCA. They do this despite the fact that the express language in the GCA on frames and receivers and what is a firearm, in fact, does not encompass those types of items. The frames and receivers rule is almost a mirror copy of what the ATF tried to do with bump stocks. Prior, the ATF had said that 80%ers and 80%er kits are not frames or receivers, they are not firearms, and therefore they were not regulated as such. But now all of a sudden they have changed their mind with the new rule and also the open letter that they sent out recently. And it is this back and forth and the changing and expanding of a definition beyond the powers of the ATF, which will be directly impacted by this Cargill decision, because that's exactly what happened with the ATF's rule on bump stocks. It also helps that currently there are various cases in the Fifth Circuit, the Vanderstock case, the Division 80 case, the Polymer 80 case, which are in the Fifth Circuit that are challenging that frames and receivers rule. And since the Fifth Circuit en banc panel ruling is precedent and binding on those lower courts, it just will help those cases to actually strike down that rule on frames and receivers, because now they have firm precedent, strong language that indeed these types of actions are invalid. This also gives the ATF major troubles when it comes to their upcoming pistol brace rule. The ATF's pistol brace rule seeks to squeeze the pistol braces or pistols with braces on them. It tries to squeeze them into the definition of what an SBR is under the NFA. The ATF is trying to do the same type of expansion of a definition, which the Cargill ruling just found invalid. Finally, the Cargill case may in its own right become very, very important if it ends up before the Supreme Court. It's very likely that the ATF will seek review from the Supreme Court to reverse the decision by the Fifth Circuit en banc panel. In the past, the Supreme Court has denied review in multiple cases which actually challenge this bump stock rule. However, the procedural posture of those prior cases and the lower court decisions in those prior cases may not have been enticing enough to the Supreme Court for them to want to take up that issue at that time. This Cargill case has the Fifth Circuit en banc panel decision behind it, which again is striking down what the ATF did in the rule. It also discusses Chevron deference and the rule of lenity heavily, which again could be important factors that maybe the Supreme Court finds enticing and makes them want to review this issue. And because of this decision, the ATF currently faces a huge dilemma. It's a dilemma of them letting the Fifth Circuit decision stand as it is, overruling their authority on this issue, or trying their hand at getting the current Supreme Court to reverse that decision. And really, I don't think that they really have a choice. They're going to have to seek a writ of certiorari. But again, that's not super good, because you see how the Supreme Court recently ruled in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin decision, which was a very pro-2A ruling. And so maybe now they're going to have to roll their dice and see what the Supreme Court says in regards to ATF overreach. And the ATF itself is going to have to seek that review, which is going to be very interesting. So this is a major win, and I'm excited to see how the ripple effects will ultimately play out with this decision. So if you have any questions, go ahead and comment down below, and I will try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm or fuel Al Gore's rhythm. It adds fuel to his jet and signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.